Hello again, I am Blunty. This video is going to be about 3 or 4 related, intertwined, intermixed, intermingled, politically charged hot button issues. As such, I'm going to employ, I know this is going to fall on a lot of deaf ears because people just want to react and scream about what their opinion is, about what they think this video is going to be about. I'm not here to try and change your political opinion. I'm not here to try and convince you of one side or the other. I'm going to walk through some issues here and then ask you to think about how you're going to react in a certain way from a certain point of view. And I want you to wait and make it through the entire video before you do that, please. I know. It's like asking for a dog to invent space travel sometimes with this kind of issue that it is to try and ask someone to wait, listen, consider, then react. Or as I like to say, think, then do. But I want you to try for my sake. I'm not asking that you agree with me. I'm not asking that you change your opinion. I'm only asking for you to listen, think, consider, then react. Think, then do. Think, then do. I really should have merchandise printed up with that. I say it all the time on my live streams and stuff, usually when it's something dumb in a video game. Think about what you're doing, then do it. It stops me from making dumb mistakes. Sometimes. So with that said, thank you very much for your attention. If you appreciate this video, whether or not you agree with it, consider the subscribe, the like, the thumb, the comment and stuff like that. But please, if you're going to leave a comment about the topic, please listen to everything first. This is the third time I'm asking. I'm begging you, please listen, consider, then react. I'm earnestly begging you for this. It's not some sort of trick to get more engagement on our video. I earnestly, really, truly want you to listen to everything here first. Those of you with attention spans long enough to make it through the intro will hopefully be able to do that from here on in, which is why I made this intro so long. So Twitch has announced a so-called Safety Advisory Council. There's been a lot of hot takes about it already. It'll probably amount to nothing more than a toothless PR stunt made to give the impression that Twitch gives a single solid poop about some of the crappy stuff that happens within the community when we know for a fact they don't, because their actions have spoken for quite some time now that they just don't. The real issues we've been screaming about from the Twitch community still remain completely unaddressed, like the wild inconsistency of what certain streamers get away with when effectively identical behaviors from other streamers have seen them suspended or permanently banned. There is deep-seated favoritism and nepotism within the Twitch community about who gets punished and who doesn't, and it's been that way for quite some time, and they have done absolutely nothing to address this. This so-called Safety Council addresses none of that. And this so-called Safety Council has been met with a lot of ire and, frankly, rage. There's a couple of well-known streamers on there that people are actually pretty okay with, some respected people that, the community at large more or less universally respect and are glad that are there and, accept that their opinion sort of carries some weight and some worth and is representative of the Twitch community. There's a couple of self-proclaimed experts and activists from outside of the Twitch community, in and around related to cyberbullying and such. And a couple of other people who really should not be on any kind of supposedly representative advisory council for a game streaming service like Twitch at all. Especially one that's supposed to be protecting people from bullying. The first is a complete a-hole who literally bullies and abuses people with learning disorders, or just uses things like dyslexia as a derogatory term. In either case, anyone willing to do that off the cuff has absolutely no place on a council supposedly standing against bigotry, hatred, and bullying and community abuse. She is everything this council is supposed to be against. It is so cut and dried, it is ridiculous she hasn't already been kicked the F off the council. If you're listening to this, if anyone from Twitch is listening to this, if you want this council to be even remotely respected by the community at all, she has to go. The second problematic addition to this council is someone called Steph. She's a trans girl, so born physically male, but has an internal sense of feeling female, a feeling so strong and natural feeling to her that they chose to change their whole personal identity and presentation to female. Absolutely no problem there. There should 100% be someone like that on this council, someone with first-hand understanding of what that life is like to lead, because trans people are the target of quite a lot of online and IRL bullying. And it is unfortunately especially true in gamer circles and on Twitch. But also, this particular person, she feels an identification with a deer. She, in her own admission, literally goes into her backyard and eats grass, and also wears a headband with antlers to get more in touch with her deer spirit, which itself is weird because it's usually male deers who have the antlers, except for reindeer. Girl reindeer grow antlers, by the way. Did you know that? So maybe that's her deal. Maybe she identifies as a reindeer, specifically. Or a quick bit of Googling also revealed that sometimes, just sometimes, it can happen in other species. It's not common, it's pretty rare, but it can happen. There's even a thing that can happen sometimes in male deer called pseudohermaphrodite, a deer with the external genitalia of a female, but has male sex organs internally, and it grows antlers. But whatever the explanation, it really doesn't matter. Girl mind in a boy body turned girl turned boy deer, possibly, is such a wonderfully contradictory and weird mix that it has left some people very confused. And when certain types of people who think they're quite smart get confused by stuff like this, they often get angry, because being confused so easily is a reminder that they might not be quite as clever as they like people to think they are, and so they get mad. And when people like that get mad, it tends to be expressed externally, not internally. They're not mad at themselves for not understanding it, they're mad at the other people for confusing them. So she has come under fire for her expression of identity. Usually pretty aggressively, too. People very deliberately out there misgendering her, using the wrong pronoun as some kind of petty sad boy protest against her, and some even suggesting that because she thinks she's a deer, they should be allowed to literally hunt and shoot her. So that's pretty freaking creepy.
Oh, she thinks she's a deer? In that case, I should be allowed to literally shoot her with a gun and kill her and consume her body.
Yeah, that's a sensible counter-argument. Good going, lads. Way to represent the gaming community there. But none of that is actually the real issue, and not even close to why she is a catastrophically stupid choice to put on this so-called Safety Advisory Council. Because she herself is a raging pit of bigotry, hate, resentment, and absolute willingness to abuse any and all power that Twitch actually give her. Like I said in the opening, it's very likely this council is going to be fairly toothless in act. They're just there as sort of something Twitch can point to, going, oh, look, we're doing something. We're doing something about bullying. Look, we've got a council. So how much power she actually has to use is still rather up in the air. But she has said it herself, in her own unprompted words on her own stream. She thinks most gamers are white supremacists, for a start. So anyone that isn't her is automatically assumed to be a white supremacist, a racist, a Nazi.
I think a lot of you gamers are actually white supremacists. Sorry. Just a fact.
So that's her starting position. That's where she starts from. Anyone who isn't her is literally a Nazi. She considers the spoken language, demonstrably the most efficient and effective form of human communication we've ever invented, should be banned from competitive gameplay. She actually thinks being able to quickly and easily tell your own teammates what is happening and what the next plan of action is, by voice, is unfair.
The only way to have a level playing field at the highest level of play is to have is to not have voice chat. Voice chat is unfair.
As opposed to the alternative of having to stop playing the actual game and type out what happens next, thereby not actually engaging in play and opening yourself up to great risk while gaming. So, really not a very smart thing to do in a competitive game. Or using a ping system, which can actually be very effective and was highly praised in some games when it was added recently. It is still a lot more limited in how much information and how quickly you can communicate to your teammates versus just a few words in voice chat, and also requires the use of separate controls, so interrupting your actual gameplay again and thus giving you a disadvantage in competitive gameplay. It's idiotic to suggest that voice chat in competitive games should be banned or is somehow unfair. It is stupid, and she's just an idiot. But worst of all, and this is the real reason she shouldn't be there, immediately after it was announced that she was going to be on this so-called safety council, she started bragging about how this made her untouchable. And with all her new power, she would aggressively suppress any voice that wasn't in line with hers, and everyone else should be scared of what she can do to them if they so much as contradict her. Like literally, her own words.
I have power. There are some people that should be afraid of me, and that they are, because I represent moderation, and Twitch is endorsing me to do that. So
All of this, by the way, was communicated with what? The spoken word. So maybe some people shouldn't be allowed to use microphones after all. She is so powerfully and openly biased against those who don't perfectly align with her own personal worldview. She has said she's going to, abuse her power to any and every limit she can. She has said it. There's no argument against it here. She said that's what she's going to do. She's flat out said people should be scared of her. This is why she should be under fire. This is why Twitch should immediately remove her from the council. Not because she's trans, not even because she thinks she's a deer in human form and eats grass from her backyard.
in my spare time, I go out to my yard and I prance around and I eat grass. And I just watch it because it helps me feel like in tune with my dear self.
No. Obviously, personally, I don't get the whole deer thing. The trans stuff, that's actually easy. I've known and spoken with and have called trans folk peers and professional associates and friends. I, of course, have no personal direct experience of what it is to be trans, being a cis white male and everything, but I think I've had enough conversations with these people to have an understanding of their point of view. And quite frankly, I think the simple act of using someone's desired pronoun is just the absolute lowest tier, easiest act of basic human respect that can possibly be asked of anybody. It's no more or less controversial or challenging that if someone called Michael on their birth certificate, well, look, it's right there on your birth certificate. Your name is Michael. But they tell you they really prefer you call them Mike, and you continue to call them Michael, that's you showing them disrespect. It's the same thing with personal pronouns as far as I'm concerned. If you deliberately avoid using what someone tells you is their preferred pronoun, you are being aggressive. You are showing them disrespect for no greater reason than how they would prefer to be addressed. Does that make any sense to you, looking objectively at it? But the deer thing, I don't really fully get it. And I've tried. I've listened to people talk about trans species and furry stuff, and I kind of get how it can be an act of personal identity expression, a way to explore aspects of one's own personality by the use of anthropomorphizing animal traits. Like, I've always been a bit cat-like, and I've said that a few times. You know, I'm kind of a cat person. I'm quiet and passive in general. I'm quite happy to be left alone. I'm quickly aggressive when challenged, and I like naps. You know, that's all pretty cat-like behavior. I mean, it's person-like behavior too for certain personality traits, but, you know, we associate a lot of those things with cats. But I'm not about to put on a pair of cat ears and eat a mouse or chase a cockroach around the kitchen floor just to get more in touch with my inner kitty. It doesn't make any sense to me at all from a personal point of view. I think it just might be one of those personal identity is a spectrum of things. My ability to relate to whatever animalistic traits that exist within my personality isn't far enough to either end of a spectrum for me to be able to feel like it's necessary to wear a tail or chase a laser pointer across a wall. But just because I have so far absolutely failed in my own attempts to fully understand this behavior in other people, these feelings or a choice in expression of personality traits in these other people, does not give me the right to abuse someone else who does choose to express themselves this way. This frankly odd form of self-expression doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it doesn't mean I get to abuse them for it. In no way does my failure to be able to relate to this oddness allow me to freely abuse someone who does. It really is just that simple. It's my one simple rule for life, and I've lived by this for decades now. If it does not hurt anybody else, then it's basically probably fine. So I just treat these people like any other person until they do something that changes that opinion. If they wind up being a shitty person, I'll treat them like a shitty person, just like I would treat a cis, white, hetero a person of any background as a shitty person if they act like a shitty person, or a nice person if they act like a nice person. Base level human respect isn't that hard. So, Outside of getting Twitch-deer's hostile, abusive, power-hungry ass off the Twitch council, let this wacky deer person chew grass and go for a frolic in their own damn yard. Who cares? How does it possibly hurt you or anybody else? Yes, it's weird, but let them be weird. It's okay to be weird. But being trans, either transgender or even trans-species, doesn't make you immune from being just as big of an asswipe as anybody else on any other personal identity spectrum, from the go-to bad guy these days, the straight cis white male, to whatever you personally imagine is the exact antimatter opposite of that on the absolute other end of the spectrum. Nowhere between those two personal identities makes you automatically immune from being judged on your actions. That's part 2 of my rule about how to treat people. Judge by deed. Act like a shitty person, get treated like a shitty person. Like I said, it's a very simple philosophy, but it has served me very well. And it saves me from having to play politic or pussyfoot around as well. I'm very straightforward. I mean, there's a reason I stuck with the name Blunty. I'm just blunt. I don't play politic. I've always hated playing politic. Being a trans woman in the gaming community or industry at large, that's hard. That's an inarguable fact. It is very difficult. Anybody who denies this is a moron. They're absolutely in denial, or they have an agenda axe to grind of their own. Bigots abuse these people, scream hate, target harassment, even send death threats to people like our framing device here, Mrs. TwitchDeer, without a second thought, thinking that this other human being deserves it somehow because they're not conforming to the average human identity, as everybody should. But in the same breath, these abusive people will scream about how their opinion needs to be taken seriously and with respect. Well, try earning it. That's not how it works, at least not how it should work. Sadly, the loudest voices are often the ones that can't help but be heard, which is why so much discourse online or off tends to dissolve into childish, emotionally charged screaming matches whose intent is more to hurt the opposing side emotionally rather than any attempt to reach a mutual understanding, if not agreement, on the actual facts of the matters involved. And this kind of aggressive, toxic, hateful, emotionally violent behavior only reinforces the worst opinions on both sides. The hate-mongers paint themselves as exactly the kind of violent, destructive, toxic, intolerant rage machines as the other side say they are. The targeted people feel ever more attacked, which only reinforces their own biases against these people. Then they double down on their victim mentality, and that makes everything wrong in their life. It's someone else's fault. They get to just point fingers and go, oh, they were abusive, they're mean. And they take no responsibility for their own actions or words or faults or deeds. And as the repressed, as the victim, they can more easily justify their actions as reactions, like, for example, sliding headlong into an attitude of clearly being ready and more than willing to abuse any amount of power over the other side as they can get, as our dear TwitchDeer person has actually done, or intends to do. Which, of course, will only deepen the whole cycle, because then the people who get banned for just not fully agreeing with TwitchDeer person say, oh, I'm the victim now, and the whole thing just flips on its head forever and ever and ever, and it only gets more erosive and more toxic and more predatory and more hateful and more bitter and more petty. It's an idiotically simple and erosive human behavior, blindingly easy to predict when you see it from the outside, and yet almost impossible to avoid when you're already on the inside. It's almost instinctive, I think, but like many of our shallower instincts, it's not all that hard to control them once you start making an effort to recognize when you are falling into that pattern of behavior. So, while no one can force you to be friends with a trans person if you don't agree with that on a philosophical or personal level, or anyone from the broad spectrum of the alphabet rainbow brigade, it's also your choice to just treat people like people. That's literally all anybody here wants. And it's so easy. It's super easy. Literally any other choice is easier than being a hateful, abusive arsewipe here. You can, for example, just ignore them. You can treat them casually as you would any other stranger online. You can have a chat with them and see if you can learn something about the expression of self. Maybe you understand them a little better. Maybe you learn something about yourself. I, as a cis, white, straight, male, hetero guy, have certainly learned a lot about how I personally choose to express my own personal identities in various ways from just talking about it and seeing it from the outside with people who don't align with my personal part of the spectrum. Every other option is easier, is simpler, is kinder, is more human than giving in to being a bitter, little, hateful, abusive twat whose only purpose is to find the absolute deepest way to hurt someone else that you don't even know. Because that's what you're doing. Whether or not you're doing it out of a sense of personal politic, or whether or not you're doing it because you think it's lol, troll, or, whatever your reasoning is for acting this way, when you really think about it, when you really think about your actions and the way you're going about this, can only be boiled down to, what is the best way I can hurt this person? What is the most efficient way I can make this person upset? I can make this person's day worse. And then think about what it'd be like if someone else was trying to do that to you, day after day after day after day. What would that do to you? How would that make you feel? How do you think that would affect your personality? How do you think that would affect the way you relate to other people? How you expected to be treated by default? And the kind of fear and mistrust and just standoffishness that would engender in you? And why you would want to bind into smaller and smaller groups of people who do understand you and avoid interacting with that larger circle. This is how we all become these little pockets, these little tribal pockets that don't understand each other. We all withdraw. We all want our own little echo chambers where every word from everyone around us is something we personally agree with. We're never challenged. We never have to think. We never have to consider someone else's opinions or feelings. It's so dangerous as a person, not just as a community, either as a local community or as a broad community or humanity as a whole. It's dangerous to that. But you as a person, it's dangerous to, on both sides. Just being that insular, that angry, that willing to hurt somebody else. That's an internal just poison. And I speak from experience on this. My first few years of high school, I was the bully. I can say with pride that I never actually targeted anybody based on their sexual identity or personal identity or color of their skin and everything. I was just an all-access bully. I would pick on anyone. I was a complete prick, and I'm deeply ashamed of the person I was back then. And I've gone to extraordinary lengths to grow as a person, to get rid of that horrible, gross, sticky toxin. And I hate using the toxin analogy is so overused these days, but it was a toxin. It was poisoning me as a person. It was making me a worse and worse person every friggin' day. But the instant I decided to take an outside look and start changing the way I treat other people, either by just not engaging with them or ignoring them or walking away from them or making an effort to understand them better, whatever the path was for whatever person or individual I was dealing with at the time, it made everything else about being a decent person easier. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me anyway. You might have to find your own way to make sense of these various issues and the way you treat other people around you and why you're treating them like that in the first place. What about their existence is so threatening to you that you have to lash out at them? What's inside you that makes you feel that way? Just saying. Thanks for watching, if you did. I know it was long, and I know it was politically charged, and I was potentially confronting for some of you. But I hope you give it a chance, and I hope you sit down and think about it. Maybe rewatch it a couple of times, or certain sections, go through them again, and just sit down and have a think, and see how you feel about it. Because I've attacked it from a few different directions, and hopefully at least some of this has latched onto some part of some people. I don't expect everybody to agree with everything I've said, or anything I've said. All I'm trying to do is trigger a process of stop, think, then do. Think, then do. That's all it boils down to. Think, then do. I really do need to make some think, then do merchandise. Might as well make some money out of this. Pay the rent. Thanks for watching. I'm Blunty. I'll catch you next time. And speaking of rent, thank you to the patrons. You're a big help. Thank you.